Hey everybody, this is a math review of Chapter 2, and this specifically is for the grade 4 concepts that they need to know in Chapter 2, which is a lot of numeration, so a lot of place value, rounding, and things like that. So let's just start off with place value. Place value basically means that a value that a unit has, a digit has, is based on its place. So if it's the first, it's the ones, of course, tens, hundreds, thousands, and 10,000s. That is what the grade 4 needs to know. Be confident working with numbers up to about 10,000 or so. Let's now take a look at some of the work we did in class was to illustrate some of the different numbers using base 10 blocks. We have 1,000 cubes, we have 100 flats, we have 10 sticks, and we have just the 1 cubes. So typically I might present a number, let's say 1,312, and then the kids would have to then draw that, or if they're using blocks, use blocks to illustrate that. So that might look something like this. Another thing that I need to know is how to write numbers in expanded form. Basically, they take the different units and they tease them out separately. So typically, if there's 4 numbers, as there is in this number we're looking at, you're going to end up with 4 numbers that you need to expand. So in the end, it would be 2,000 plus 300 plus 40 plus 5. Now, the exception to that is when you have a 0 in the number. Right now we have a 0 in the hundredths number this time. So instead of writing 2,000 plus 0 hundredths plus 40 plus 5, we leave that out. And we end up with 2,000 plus 40 plus 5. So again, the rule normally is make sure you have enough expanded numbers to match the numbers you're starting with. But if you have a 0, that's not going to count. You're not going to have a number for the zeros. Let's also talk about some rounding numbers. Rounding has a lot to do with estimating. Sometimes you don't want to know exactly how many pennies you have or something like that. You just want a general amount. So let's talk about some rounding whole numbers. So typically in rounding, you sometimes have to round up and sometimes you round down. And let's talk about why you would do that. First of all, this is a strategy I typically taught the kids in terms of how to round. First of all, look at the place value target. That's a lot of words, but what it really means is if it says rounding to the nearest hundredth or tens or thousandths, then you look at that number first. And secondly, then you evaluate the number, the digit to the right. Rounding to the nearest 10. Let's say in this number we have to round to the nearest 10. So what I do is somehow I will underline the tens number, and then I'm going to evaluate the number to the right. So in this case, I'm going to evaluate the 5. Now there's 2 things that are going to happen. If it's a 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4, we say that we round down. And in that case, the 4 doesn't change. But if it's a 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, then that is rounding up, and that means the 4 is going to increase by 1. So for example, in this case, the 5 is in the rounding up department. So that means the 4 is going to switch to a 5. And we put a 0 in the ones department. Let's try another one. Let's round this to the nearest hundredth. So 100. So I'm underlining the 6, evaluating the 4. Because the 4 is in the round down department, then that means that the 6 does not change, and the 4 and 5 both change into zeros. Another skill the grade 4s need to know is multiplying by 10, 100, or 1,000. And once you get the hang of this, it's not too difficult. What I normally think about is, rounding by 10. If you have some experience, sorry, not rounding by 10, multiplying by 10. If you have some experience multiplying by 10, you'll know that what you really need to do is take the 0 from the 10, move it over to whatever you're multiplying, and you'll get your answer. So the 19 becomes 190. Now let's multiply by 100. Same idea, except this time the 2 zeros from the 100 will move over and make it 1,900 or 1,900. Sometimes the questions are written like this. 30 times something equals 3,000. And this one could be a little bit tricky. What I normally do is I take that 30 and I compare it to the answer. And I know that the 3 and the 0 came from the 30, and that means the two other zeros must have come from 100. That's the way I kind of figure out those mystery ones. Two other things that kids have to know is writing numbers in words. So 167, you would have to write 167. Remember, if you're doing something like 67, the 60 and the 7 would be separated by a hyphen. Also, there's a small section on adding money as well. So those are all the main concepts, for the most part, inside Chapter 2. Good luck.